Well, should we get started?
Yeah.
So we don't run out of time? Excellent. Well, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Can I just sit here instead of stand up here? I feel so much like a college professor.
That's
standing up
fine.
there.
You don't want to feel like that, right?
That'd be terrible. Well, my name is Nathan Lefebvre. I'm the trombone player in the Cathedral Brass, and you guys all know Louis and Aaron Beebe and Dan Sadamka. And part of our residency is to be here, to be participating in the education of the church also, and being involved in the Sunday school today as part of our artist in residency, I guess you could say. And Louis said that last Sunday he gave a talk on arts in the church, and you want to just kind of give us a quick recap of what you did?
Yeah, I talked a little bit about the sort of the intersectionality of that's my new buzzword these days.
Intersectionality.
Intersectionality. Yeah, I know. It's one of those words that if you use it, it makes you smart or sound smart. But talking about the faith and music making during Advent, and we as musicians, part of and for me, I'll speak for me, part of what I do when I worship is I make music. So musicking for me is a very worshipful act and activity. And so I talked about that a little bit, and about, you know, how the Greek philosophy is that this is super basic, but music, the Greeks believed that music could fundamentally alter who you are as a person. And so, and we all know that to still kind of be true, and that it's maybe a little bit less literal than how the Greeks interpreted it. But yeah, so that's what I talked about last week.
Cool. So, and I play in another brass group. It's called Euro Brass, and it's a member of, half of us are Europeans and half of us are Americans. And we come together in Germany, and we spend 3 weeks on the road in Germany playing concerts for folks and sharing testimony. And it's been a really wealth of experience for me. And one of the great parts about it is the connections I've made with different musicians, Christian musicians around the world. We find in Christian circles that you either find people who are really great musicians and maybe questionable people with questionable character, or they're great Christian people but of questionable musical abilities. And so to find a group that is both musicians and fervent believers of Jesus, it's a really amazing experience for me to be a part of, and I love it. Part of the reason I love playing in this group, because they're just great people to be able to hang with. I learned about an organization called Crescendo, which is a worldwide movement of Christian artists coming together and supporting one another, both through music and through intellectual curiosity. And it's not just specifically about musicians, but it's about the arts and our Christian faith. And so I accessed some different articles that are on their website as I've been trying to get my toes wet a little bit in this organization. And I came upon this article. So a lot of what I've kind of pulled out of it is being taken from this article that I read called The Art of Christian Point of View by Beat Rink. And I wish my first name was Beat, because that would be very cool. But he's a German, and so it was translated into English so that all of the Crescendo folks could read it as well. Really, really fantastic article that really dives much deeper than I think we're going to today. But I tried to pull out from this 5 main points, or 5 thoughts that I just wanted us to kind of discuss a little bit today. And the first thought that came out of this article, I think that kind of ties us together with what we're talking about with what Louis did last week, was that art always points us to God. And how I'm going to kind of proceed through this is I've got a couple quotes from the article, then either some scripture or some thoughts that I think that we can discuss together and kind of share together. The first quote that I wanted to pull out of here is that creativity in any way other than as a gift originating in God and defying all our attempts to pin it down intellectually is impossible. Let me read that one more time. Creativity in any other way any other than as a gift originating in God and defying all attempts to pin it down intellectually is impossible. And so to me, it was speaking to the point that creativity is something that is in its nature divinely inspired and divinely oriented. And to try to intellectually define creativity is almost near impossible. And so I pulled out a couple different verses that spoke to that. Do you guys have Bibles here and want to read, or?
It's a church. What do you mean?
Yeah.
We don't even know stinking Bibles.
There are
There's
Bibles up
over
here
there,
if anyone
so-
wants.
I've got the passages written out here, so.
Does anybody like? Yeah, I'll get a couple.
Awesome. So the first one comes from Romans 1:20. Somebody want to read that one to us?
It's 120. This is the
Thank you.
presence of God in nature, I think, right after Romans.
You're exactly right.
I'm fine.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can read it.
Great. Go ahead, Louis.
So, Romans 1:20, ever since the creation of the world, his eternal power and divine nature, invisible though they are, have been understood and seen through the things he has made.
Yeah, that's great. That's great right there. So to me, I read that and I think, I've always read that passage and I've always thought about how, the sunset is a beautiful example of how God is real. Or just looking out over the plains of Nebraska and just the beautifulness that there is, or looking upon the mountains and you see that. But as I was reflecting on this article and what it was talking about creativity, I thought, why can't this also be about the creative spirit with which God put in every human being, that we're endowed with this creativity so that it can point us back to him. It can point us back to Christ. It can point us back to the ultimate creator that ever was. How about the next one? And then we can talk a little bit more. Romans 2:14-15. Not too far away.
I got it.
Cool, thank you.
When Gentiles who do not possess the law do instinctively what the law requires, these, though not having the law, are a law to themselves. They show that what the law requires is written on their hearts, to which their own conscience also bears witness, and their conflicting thoughts will accuse or perhaps excuse them.
So how does that kind of connect with this idea of creativity is innately connected with our humanness?
Oh, me specifically?
Yeah, anybody. I'm looking at you because you're taking a breath, but.
Well, we're waiting on you.
Well, this is not something, I guess, the presence of God's order in creation is such that you don't have to be Jew or Gentile. The Jews have the law, which is a special manifestation of God's presence in the world. But even Gentiles, by being part, by having theologically having been created in the image of God, can understand something of God by just simply being part of the world and using their reason to know God.
Yeah, I think so. I think, there's an imprint of God on our DNA, and whether or not we acknowledge it through the law or it just happens to come permeating through our life, I think it's kind of a fingerprint of God and how it's just placed on our hearts. And arts, in a lot of ways, for me, and I don't know about these guys, but is really that gateway to my heart, and it's a way for that heart, and like Lou was saying, to really worship, to be able to worship. It's something that is just, it flows out of us. And I think that this is a small little showing of the fingerprint of God and how he does that. Here's another quote from the article that I wanted to discuss. Art is for Christians a gift of God with image characteristics, a human ability reflecting the divine creator. So if somebody would read Genesis 1:26-27.
This is the having been created in the image of God, right?
Helps to have a religion professor here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It does.
Yeah, well, but this is, good stuff.
Genesis 1:26-27.
That's page 1.
You want to read for us?
Sure.
Great.
26.
Yep.
And 20.
7.
Yeah.
Okay. Then God said, let us make humankind in our image according to our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the wild animals of the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth. So God created humankind in his image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them.
So, the quote again is, art is for Christians a gift of God with image characteristics, a human ability reflecting the divine creator. And I think it's just another way that we can point to that God has put this idea of creativity, or dare I say even the arts, in us because that's who he is. And it's a way for us to be like God because he created us in his image. And so the things that we find ourselves doing to give back to him, I think, are things that are what he would require of us because he's put it into us to be like him. Here's the next one. Ephesians 2:10, excuse me. Ephesians 2:10. Somebody want to read that one?
I'll read it.
Go.
For we are what he has made us, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand to be our way of life.
And so how does that speak to art is for Christians, a gift of God, the image characteristics, the human ability, reflecting a divine creator? Guys have any thoughts? You want to read it one more time?
Yes, for we are what he made us, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand to be our way of life.
And my translation that I have written here says that we should walk in them, or those good works that God had prepared ahead of us. A way of life, or that we should walk in them.
What translation do you have?
I use the ESV.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, well, this will be the RSV, no doubt, which is not terribly poetic at times. It's pretty good in terms of the.
Yeah, to me, I think it really points to, again, that we are created to do something, that we were imparted with this creativity. We were created with the idea that we must then go and do this thing that is put in us. And I would even submit that all of humankind have a capacity for creativity. Not all of us are musicians, not all of us are poets, not all of us are actors, not all of us are painters, but there is something that we do in our daily lives that just yearns for us to create something. My father was not a musician, but he loved to build and make kites and to fly kites. And I always thought how fun that was, because really flying a kite is perhaps the most trivial thing that a person could do with their time, because you just put a thing up there and watch it go. But he had great fulfillment out of making these kites and taking them outside and flying them like a little kid would. And I think that was just, it was his inspiration of creativity that just had to come out and what he did. I'll read the next quote and we'll just keep chugging along. We go till 10:15, is that right? I want to make sure I leave us time to play.
Yeah.
Okay. The church has been an important source of work and a spiritual home for many artists over the centuries. So the next one is Exodus 31, verses 1 through 11. And I'll just read this one because it's longer and you don't have to search for it if you don't want. Exodus 31, 1 to 11. The Lord said to Moses, "See, I have called by name Bezalel, the son of Uriah, the son of Hur, of the tribe of Judah, and I have filled him with the Spirit of God, with ability and intelligence, with knowledge and all craftsmanship, to devise artistic designs, to work in gold, silver, and bronze, and cutting stones for setting and carving wood, to work in every craft. And behold, I have appointed with him Oholiab, the son of Ashmach, of the tribe of Dan. And I have given to all ability that they may make all that I have commanded you, the tent of the meeting, the ark of the testimony, and the mercy seat that is on it, and all the furnishings of the tent, the table and its utensils, and the pure lampstand with all its utensils, and the altar of incense, and the altar of burnt offering and all its utensils, and the basin and its stand, and all the finely worked garments, the holy garments for Aaron the priest, and the garments for his songs, and their service as priests, and all the anointing oil and fragrant incense in the holy place. According to all I have commanded you, they shall do. I love this passage in particular because it doesn't say that they found somebody who could do these things. And a lot of these things that they're making are some of the mundane things that, the tent, the stand that the lamp sits on, and, things that to us are just maybe not the things that are up in front and very central to what we do when we worship. But yet God was so specific that he wanted not only somebody that could make these things, but to make them well, that could do them with artistic integrity, and that God cares about even the little things, the lampstand and the basin stand, that it doesn't just have a function, but that it has more than that. It has an artistic quality to it. And when I think about music in the church, I'm somewhat dismayed sometimes at the approach of music in the church and how oftentimes people who are not capable musicians are up in front leading music and leading worship. And I think of this passage because God asks specifically for the artists to be doing these things. And I mourn the fact that sometimes we as artists are not in the church to be able to do that, or that we as a church don't support artists in order to be able to do that and to usher people before God's kingdom. Or for various other reasons, I think that happens. But I think it points to, ever since the beginning of the church and the tabernacle that's being shifted around the wilderness at this time, God wanted artists to be a part of it. And there was a home for their art, and there was a home for what they did. And we as a church today, are we that home still for artists to live? Or is there a dichotomy or a chasm between the two? And I think it's a worthy discussion that we can continue to keep talking about. But to me, it points very clearly that the church has been and should be the home for all of this creative work.
I got a tangent here that I just can't
Please.
keep quiet. When I hear what you just said, I think of what I call holy karaoke. The people, with the karaoke set sitting up in the front of it just drives me crazy.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff. And I know that some people just absolutely love this contemporary worship, and hey, let's get the tape and let's find the right place and then you've got this canned music that you're singing to, and some of them even have now those automatic ring or
Auto
tuners
Yeah.
and things like that.
Yeah.
But what you're talking about here, I mean, people who the word skill is used many times, but then you're going to fall into this thing where you are only allowing certain people to have control over the art, because some people will say, well, you've got to let the Holy Spirit just act the way it's supposed to. So aren't you being kind of, snobbish in that?
Yeah.
How do you answer that?
Yeah.
Just let you know, I'm with you completely.
No, I
don't
totally-
want people singing holy karaoke in front of the church. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, I think that's a good point, and I appreciate you bringing that up. And I think one answer could be to that. I mean, there's always been in certain Christian streams a sense of reverence for the pulpit. And we probably wouldn't just let somebody who walk in off the street come up and preach and start to preach God's word to the congregation as a whole. we would want to make sure that this person is vetted, that this person has education, that this person has training to be doing what they're doing. But why is it that we turn around and let, anybody who has a track and a desire to sing come up in front of the church and sing? And I guess the argument that I'm laying out there is that it's every bit as much of presenting the word, the gospel, as the pastor would be in the pulpit.
Yeah.
But yet, for some reason, because we have a low regard for the arts, or because we have a low regard for performance, or maybe even perhaps because we just don't have anything else. There's nobody that can do this, so the only thing we can do is sing along with the track because we don't have anybody in our church. Because I feel like there's a responsibility on the part of the church to also encourage the music making, to encourage the artists, not only so that they can come into the church and be a part of the church, but that we can grow those artists that are within the
I
church.
was just gonna say, if that's the situation, where all they have is a track and a machine, cultivate something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Through the church, artistic training through the church is not unheard of.
Yeah.
Specifically in the area of music.
Well, I mean, that's the early musicians
Exactly.
were trained by the church. That's where they got their training.
Yeah.
From
Yeah.
the church.
Or at the very least, and I think I bring this up a little bit later, but what is our response as Christians to engage in the music education that's happening within our communities? Are we attending concerts and supporting these young people? Are we having a presence at these performances like the Hastings Symphony concert we're going to do this afternoon? Is there a Christian presence at these places? And are there people that are out there saying, that was great, we'd love to have you come and play our church this time? And I believe, and I have some friends that greatly differ in this about whether or not you let a non-believer come in and play music in the church and the function of Christian worship. And we could have the rest of the Sunday school and talking and flushing that out. But I think what I'm hopefully trying to point us to is that music or arts in general, by their very nature, point us to God. And so whether or not you've got a Christian performing it or not, I think doesn't really impact the way that it can still usher us before the throne. In fact, I think it might even enhance it. It's if you hire a professional brass quintet to come in and play for your church, rather than have a bunch of amateurs come and play that really love the Lord, but really haven't practiced or spent time developing
It
their
brings us
craft.
back to that Romans 2 passage that I read, the Gentiles and the Jews. Just because they're Gentiles doesn't mean they can't. Yeah, absolutely. There's an inspiration that can take place despite or regardless of the people playing the music.
Yeah.
So
Well, and I think just our society, and this is kind of backing up just a little bit, but our society has gotten to a point where we very much view music as entertainment,
exactly.
which is different than high art. And so music can be high art, but it can also be entertainment. And most of the music that we consume, I'm not going to say that. A lot of the music that a lot of people consume is
right.
purely for entertainment's sake. And there's
50 that's easy to dance.
Yeah, and there's-
give it an 87. Yeah.
and there's total value in that. But as a result, what has happened is that and certainly here in the United States, I think, the masses don't regard music as high art, and that's a gross generalization.
Well,
But
look what
it's-
happens in the so-called contemporary worship. That music has become entertainment. It
Right.
really has. The praise music is really entertainment music,
Right.
as opposed to, I don't know what would be the alternative. I would call it a much more meditative, reflective kind of high art music.
Yeah.
That's what you're talking about.
Yeah. Well, and I think too that, like, if you look at the stuff that stands the test of time, it's always better art that stands the test of time. And there's a reason why even my students at the college and our marching band show, we played Stairway to Heaven. Stairway to Heaven is a great song. And I think it's popular music, which usually is regarded as entertainment. But the reason why people still listen to Stairway to Heaven and still know Stairway to Heaven is because it's a great song. The reason why we're still playing Bach, almost 300 years after he died is because it's great music. The Josquin that we're gonna play a little bit, it's great music. That stuff stands the test of time. And but our society has gotten to a point where we don't always value that, or we don't recognize that, or we don't think about those things.
And where can you hear, you know, we want to nurture young musicians, but where can you really hear music like this, unless it's at the, you know, every now and then we've got a high school choir concert or things like that, if not Sunday morning.
Yeah, right.
Sunday morning is the place where that kind of music can still have a life, you know. Where do you all play when you're not, you got the symphony, but
The random gig here or there.
Well, and you know, to the other side of that, to this person sitting in the congregation listening, you know, we talk a lot amongst ourselves, as do probably many educators, about access.
Mhm.
And this
Right.
is, you know, the point you just brought up is access is every Sunday morning potentially, if you can get well-trained artistic people in front of the congregation playing at a high level.
right.
And it's our responsibility
Oh, absolutely.
to do that. And I think, you know, kind of to your point, we as musicians feel a real great sense of responsibility to do it as well as it can be done. And you know, there's a place for amateur musicians everywhere. And I will submit that I think there's a place for amateur musicians in church too. But not at the, again, there's balance, you know, because I want to hear, you know, Susie Q, who likes to sing and gets great joy out of singing, you know, be a song leader on Sunday morning. Like, I think that is great, but we also need to hear, you know, let's get Renee Fleming in here to sing, you know,
Sure.
something as well.
Well, and I think all of this can continue to keep pointing us back to, I mean, I love all this discussion about music and its importance in art and society and culture. And I think back to the heart of it is, why is this important for us as the church? And I think and as we're going to keep going through my next thought, which is art and the culture, it's important because it's the DNA of God everywhere. And we have a responsibility to treat that DNA with respect and the utmost care, just like we do the Word of God. Here's one more passage, and then we'll jump on to the next thing. Church is an important source and spiritual home for the arts. This is 1 Samuel 16:14-23. This is David and Saul, and David playing on his lyre. Of course, David being the author of the Psalms, some of the great songs that we have to help give us inspiration and comfort in our times of need. And it says, "Let your servant seek out a man who is skillful in playing the lyre, and when the harmful spirit from God is upon you, he will play it, and you will be well." Whenever the harmful spirit from God was upon Saul, David took the lyre and played it in his hand. So Saul was refreshed and was well, and the harmful spirit departed from him. And I think it's just one more point to the fact that the home of these arts is in God's bosom, and that it has the power to move spirits, and that Saul's people didn't just say, let's find somebody who can sing a song or who knows how to play the lyre, but they specifically said, let us find someone who is skillful at playing the lyre, so that it can impact you and it can move you in a way that has great value for his life. So the second thought comes from art and culture. And I'm going to just throw out a couple of quotes and then ask some questions of you guys of how we can maybe flesh this out a little bit more. "We can hardly imagine any period without the important contribution made by the arts." So I just ask to you guys, can you either think of a period of our history where there was arts that were not important, or can we think about how arts have been important in our history as mankind and as we've unfolded throughout all of the eternity?
I would submit that the arts have never been unimportant. Maybe even going so far as to say the arts are what led us forward out of the Dark Ages into the Renaissance, into the Baroque era. And that's why they are those eras.
Mhm.
And I think the arts were at the forefront of all of that. Because socially, art speaks to everything, whether it's allowed to be said or not.
Yeah.
And I think that especially early on, when the church was probably the source for music in most everybody's life, and the arts, visual art, even like the ornamentation of the place of worship, the stained glass windows, all that stuff. I think that as that evolved, so too did we.
Well, and you mentioned the Baroque period and the Romantic period and the Classical period, all these different time periods. I mean, why are they called that? Well, it's because the literature, the visual art, the drama, the music, the architecture, all of that stuff was moving society forward as a whole.
Stained glass in the great cathedrals.
Yeah, amazing, isn't it?
But think about what the Protestant Reformation did, though, and especially when you move more towards the Puritan end of things. They got rid of all of that.
Yeah.
I think to our detriment, to our great detriment. One of the hardest things I've had coming back to the Presbyterian Church is just that, no, I want the smells and bells. I really do. Well, and the stained glass and all of that.
Yeah.
I want to enter this cocoon of sacredness.
Yeah.
Just an empty church basement doesn't do it for me, or an empty auditorium like Hastings College, our French Memorial Chapel. Well, it might, you can worship there. You can turn it into a warehouse very easily. It's basically a great big building. Well, sorry, but I don't get any inspiration from that,
Yeah.
So, we have a lot to answer for as Protestants, in that tradition, I think.
Well, and I think it points to us just needing to reevaluate and value the arts as a contribution to worship as a whole. I totally agree. I being with Eurobrass and traveling Europe or traveling Germany, I've been in lots of different types of churches, and very contemporary churches and very old cathedrals, and there is each space feels very differently, and it's the architecture and it's the interior design and it's all of that contribute to the feeling that you get when you walk into one of these places, and that has an important impact just as much as what word is being said. And so I agree. In fact, he talks a little bit about the Reformation and how Martin Luther, may have done some damage to the arts in the church by trying to strip away all what he saw as ancillary and get to just the words, and take away all the other arts and get to just the Word of God. I think that's separating church and culture in a very negative way. Here's another thought. Taking pleasure in art brings people together, whether concerts, theaters, museums, or cinemas. It forms an important part of communal activity. And I just ask you guys to think, when is it ever that you've been with other people, that you've gathered with other people, where the arts are not present? Anytime we gather as people, we're listening to music, we're enjoying a movie together, we're looking at beautiful paintings or artworks, we're enjoying great food. There's always some aspect of the arts that bring us together. And I can practice my trombone as much as I want in my basement all by myself, but there is really no fulfillment for me as a musician unless I gather with other people and do it together for people. That's what the arts are all about. And what an amazing place for Christians to be is at the center of this gathering community. We talk about the importance of Christians being at these concerts and being at these events. And I think that's partly why, because the arts are innately about bringing people together. Even the stained glass windows are not made to stay hidden. They're made to be displayed so that everybody, yes, the light can come through and we can all appreciate God's creation through that. And the creator of those things, the artists sometimes get props and they get some celebration. But I think as there's a quote here I'm going to read later on, what artist doesn't really appreciate that their art comes from some higher calling than just themselves? I think every great artist really realizes that there's something special to what they do that is not just them. And I think that points to Christ. Here's another quote. A society in which religious belief dies out will in time also suffer artistic decay. Let me read that again. A world of society in which religious belief dies out will in time also suffer artistic decay. A person named Emil Brunner said that quote. What do you guys think about that?
Well, I'm going to demonstrate my political biases here, but I look at religious belief today in some circles that has absolutely no artistic value to it. I'm thinking about some of the Christian nationalist types of churches. I don't know. I mean, I know where Brunner was coming from. He wrote that right after World War II, I think. But in all of this, I'm thinking about the way art can be manipulated too, in various ways. But look at some of the most popular evangelical Christianity that we have today. What is the art that's involved with that? But I don't have much respect for it. It's entertainment art, So I have to think about that. My initial response is no. I'm going to have to look for an example of that is contrary to what Brunner is talking about. That's the first one that comes up.
Yeah.
Evangelical Christianity, I think, and far right wing. What's that?
That's an interesting point. One of the things that I've always held dear is that art meant to be consumed is not always art. Meant to be consumed is not always going to be artistic. But if anything is well done and it's artistically done, beauty will emerge for anybody who chooses to consume it.
Yeah.
And so if you start with that end in mind, you avoid some of those pitfalls you were talking about.
I was thinking about this quote just the other day. I was at a basketball game, and in between when my pep band was playing, the announcer was playing music that the basketball players liked. And I was really struck by how, I don't know if I can go out and say that, well, I'm gonna say it anyway, how worthless the music really was. I mean, it was a beat and some guy, singing on one or two notes.
Yeah.
I mean, it was, when I think about Bach and then I think about what I was listening to, I was like, there is such a chasm here.
Yeah.
And I think about it, less about it from a political standpoint, but more of I feel like spirituality, and I'm not even I'm maybe going beyond just Christianity even, but a sense of the spirit and the spirituality, or a sense of something that's greater than our physical world, allows us to be, I think, in touch with our inner parts and makes us to appreciate beauty. And I think when we make life about things that are tangible and real that we can only touch and see, and we exclude that, I feel like we lose that sense of connection to our spirit and what makes us human. And I think what Brunner is talking about is when we get to that point, that's when art begins to die, because it becomes about something else other than your soul. And I feel like, and my brother is a rock and roll musician, and I played in rock bands and stuff, and I've done all that stuff too. And he and I would vehemently disagree on this, but I just feel like there's so much music that's being made today that is so void of anything of value, because it's made to be consumed and it's not made to express what is going on inside of our heart. We're trying to sell albums instead of making music that's going to move people, or that moves me as a human.
Yeah, one promotes inner reflection and introspection, self-reflection. The other tries to mask it in any way.
Mm.
You know, I mean, think about those guys playing basketball. They weren't out there thinking about their true human. They were wanting to expend energy and get psyched up, right?
Yep.
Almost to the detriment of any kind of spiritual understanding of themselves. But I felt that too, you know, when I was a kid playing basketball, I used to love to hear Sweet Georgia Brown, you know, the Harlem Globetrotters sound. Yeah, anyway, I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
But don't you think there's room in the world for both of those things?
I do.
I mean, truly.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a whole different purpose behind them. In the same way, if you have a little congregation in the middle of nowhere and they're all kite builders, and so they have a tape going and it happens to be, you know, popular Christian and they're all praising God, do you think God looks down and says, oh, not art, not art, I'm not taking it? I
Yeah.
don't think so. I don't
Yeah.
think he judges us like that. You
Yeah.
make do with what you have.
Yeah.
There may not be any artists. You know, if this congregation was counting on me, they would be really in bad shape. I'm not talented in that way. Yeah, I took lessons forever. What, did I ever get good? No, because I have no talent. So I think, you know, and it's great to be all, yes, we've got to have this great art and it's going to inspire me, but real life gets in the way sometimes. you
Yeah.
know?
I agree. And I've been at churches and places where that's been the case. And my own church, sometimes we don't have a huge depth of musicians that can play. And so we, you know, sometimes the music is not what I would hope it would be. I think the call to action, or I think the call to us is, what is our attitude towards the arts and what is our attitudes towards those situations? You know, if we're that church that's kite builders out in the middle of nowhere and we have no artists in our church, should we be looking outwards more and trying to find those artists? Or should we be looking towards ways to engage in the culture of the society that's around us? I mean, it's not a simple answer and it's not a simple formula, I think. But I think that there's value in the arts itself for us to try to reach out as a church, to try to engage with those people.
Yeah, and I don't think that music that's designed to consume is bad at all. I mean, I drove back from Lincoln and I was listening to Cardi B because that's what I like to listen to when I drive. You know, if I listen to a Mahler symphony, Mahler is my favorite composer, one of my favorite composers, and in some ways I could listen to his music all day long. But if I'm in the car at 1 o'clock in the morning on the interstate, it's gonna put me to sleep. So I listen to Cardi B, who's a rapper.
Yeah.
And you know what? I have fun when I listen to it. It's entertaining, which is okay.
Mhm.
But I think it's, again, it's this sense of responsibility we have to, in spite of the entertaining stuff, finding the joy and the divine in high art. Is that kind of what you're?
Yeah, well,
what
I
you're
think so.
getting at? Like, and in church, we have a responsibility to do that, especially in church.
Well, because I had the same thing, like, it wasn't Sweet Georgia Brown, but, you know, I enjoy music too that can just pump me up and get me going. And I guess I don't mean to be derogatory towards that music. I feel like it's important for us to balance both.
Yes.
And I think maybe perhaps what Emil was saying, or if I could put words in his mouth, it's that society maybe begins to shift one way or the other, and we lose that sense of balance when we lose that sense of faith in connection to that. Yes, ma'am.
Well, it's just like, depending on where I am at home in my head, then what I choose to play all day on my device or whatever. And it might be something easy listening, or it might be something that pumps me up to get more done, which I should be playing all the time. But I mean, just where my head is and my heart is during the day determines what I play or what I have to listen to.
And doesn't that precisely point to the fact that music, I guess we're talking about specifically, a way that engages parts of us that nothing else can.
Right.
Yeah. it can put into reality the things that we feel.
Yeah, you truly do need both kinds. That
Mhm.
kind that's the consumer and the kind that's the divine. So in my opinion, it helps us have more of appreciation for some of the music that inspires us, that has more substance, if you will, than some of that stuff that just kind of pumps us up. It helps us to find between the two. And as music educators, or at least as myself as a music educator, I have to play with my band some of the music that I know is going to get them tapping their toe, kind of smiling, going, oh, yeah, we really play. It's because it's fast. It's got really good rhythms to it. It's just fun. So that way I can throw another piece of music at them that's maybe just as fun, but has more depth to it. And I can teach them more appreciation for what all is involved with it. So I think a combination of two. You talked about the rock band. Recently, I just started playing in a 60s, 70s rock band, completely out of my element. Never would have thought in a million years I'd be doing that. But it's fun. It's fun. And I'll tell you what, there is some music there that is very challenging for me because it's out of my area. So then when I come and play in this quintet or in the symphony, and it's like, oh yeah, but I have an appreciation for both, and both of them have a purpose.
Mm-hmm.
So going to your point, I think you're exactly right. I go to the Presbyterian Church in Grand Island, and coming here to play in the Presbyterian Church here, the music ministry is so different, and I'm so jealous of what is going on here, and I don't understand why just 20 miles down the road we can't be doing the same thing. But it's just getting to the point to where we get people to I hate to say this, but buy in to say, hey, we need to do this. You know, when we changed hymnals to just the one line melody rather than having the 4-part harmony.
Right.
You know, that was huge. That was huge. And that was a pretty divisive thing in the church at that time, because you had the traditional say, well, but we don't know how to read that. We only know how to do this, and we can only get 20% of the people here to sing anyway. So we need to make sure that we have the melody. So it's going to be a long road, and it's going to take a lot of teaching and a lot of people to be very genuine in trying to help people get back to maybe that pendulum that you were talking about, to get back to some of the solemn divine music that we all know and love.
Well, I think we're so blessed because the music here in this church is just, I mean, it's so wonderful, but I do think the college has had a big impact in making that available
Mhm.
And I
more
think
than some other places. You know, it made it easier, and it's not impossible for other places, but I think it made it easier here, maybe.
And what a great thing that this church has built that relationship with the college. And we can see fruits of it in a way that is meaningful. I mean, even just this discussion, I feel like is super fruitful and meaningful, because there's inquisitive minds in this church about music and art and the relationship that those two intersect at.
To speak to both of your points, though, you know, we talked about this earlier this morning. When you have the absence of those things, you know, when does it fall upon the church to start to cultivate it for themselves instead of looking to bring it in from an outside source? You know, that is how the musical training worked in a lot of areas up until, you know, probably the mid 1700s. And so there's an inward solution, I guess, to that, if a congregation feels like that's missing.
Well, we're oddly enough running short on time. So I'm going to skip over a whole bunch more that I had that I'd love to just continue this discussion for another couple hours. I bet it would be really fruitful.
But we do love to hear you play.
Yeah.
I want to hear the rock band that has a tube band.
Yeah.
So would I.
Dan also plays the electric bass. I do want to just add in a little caveat that part of this was supposed to be about how Christmas and art and church and how it all comes together. And I just had a couple thoughts here that Christmas is really the church's big scene, and that it's the one time that we as a community, as a culture, come together and just embrace a season of togetherness, a season of love, of giving, of generosity. And if all of the above that we've been talking about are true about art, there is an impact that the music, that the art can have on the Christmas season. I mean, the words that we sing, the story that is being told, and I think as a church, the things that we do, like this Christmas kids pageant that's going to be happening, is fantastic outreach, I think, for a community to bring artists into the church and to let them add to the worship of a time that is so valuable to our life as a church, our church calendar, you know, the birth of Christ and the beginning of his advent, I think is so important. And so I think that's why Christmas time is such an important time for us as musicians, not only because there's more work for us as musicians, but I personally love Christmas songs and Christmas music, so I love to play it. And I think that we as a community love to come together and enjoy it. So I would like to have my friends, we're going to play a little bit, and we're going to play a piece of music at Just Came to Pray, which is very early in the life of Western classical music. But it's a small, I think, demonstration of why what you guys are doing as a church is so important in bringing us into the church and being able to engage in the church worship time. We're going to play this piece of music. We're going to play it 3 times for you. The first time we're going to play it, and we're going to play a piece of beautiful music with wrong notes in it. And we're going to purposely put the wrong notes in there because I want you to see how distracting errors can be to the performance of music. Then we're going to play through it again, and we're going to play through it with correct.
Speaking of Mueller.
Yeah.
No, just kidding.
We're gonna play through it with all the correct notes, but we're gonna do our very best not to put any emotion, any feeling, any musicality to it. And you're gonna find that beautiful music played without skill is boring and inaccessible. And then we're gonna play it as we do as musicians. And hopefully, if we do our jobs right, it will create a little moment of God with us here, where this music can take us before God's throne as we prepare our hearts for worship that's gonna be coming. You guys ready to play?
So are you gonna be here next week? What are we, are you doing
This is
3 weeks or just 2 weeks?
Just the 2 weeks.
Okay.
But I think we'll have to have Nathan back and do this again.
Darn.
I have a whole lot more notes.
Yeah.
I'm glad he said that we were gonna miss some notes, sitting here for an hour.
Where are we starting, Louis?
Did we want to just do the end? Let's do
Sure.
A.
A to the
A
end?
to the end.
Okay, so we've got, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. So we've got basically 20 measures worth of notes here.
Okay.
We're all gonna collectively pick 2 notes that we're gonna just play incorrectly. And it doesn't have to be at the same time, it's just gonna be random, but I want you just to play 2 mistakes.
And this is a piece that we've never played before, so we're safe.
Yeah.
So those mistakes might be natural.
But just to give you a barometer, this is roughly 80% accuracy we're gonna play with, right? We're gonna play this piece 80% accurately.
So,
Which if I got an 80% in my math class, I'd be feeling really good.
yeah. At A, does anybody play on the downbeat? Okay, very good. And it's in 2.
Okay.
Ready? And.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Distance is okay.
So, you know, it's distracting, and I'm sure there's hopefully there's a part of your stomach that's a little bit turned upside down by that, because it just sounds so bad, right? And we, of course, would definitely not want that to be a part of our Christian worship service. It would be so distracting, and it would be I couldn't focus on God because I'm just so bothered by the fact that it sounds poor. Okay, so now we're gonna play A to the end, but we're gonna play it with all the correct notes, but we're gonna just put zero emotion into it. Okay? Ready? Probably a lot more like some of the music that we've heard in our churches, maybe not this specific church, but in churches in general. It's not wrong, but it's not very inspiring. It's not very, there's no connection there. It's just right notes and right rhythms. And I think we all as educators try to teach our students to get beyond the notes and rhythms, not only because we want them to worship, which that's another discussion for another day, but because there's a sense of responsibility we have to the music to make the music come out. Because I think God's imprint is upon this music and it's important. So now we're going to try to play it, and we're going to try to play it musically now that we've got a place.
It's like you're mentally together.
Yeah, but how do you do that? That's the thing.
Well, but I
Good
think
question.
that's part of what Nathan was speaking to at the very beginning. You know, a lot of time and training have gone into all four of us being able to just stand up here and sight read this piece like that, and with the adjustments that we had to make, just the same as the kite maker or, you know, whatever. And so whatever your craft is, whatever your passion is, whatever your creative outlet is, I think that it's really important that we expand that thought to not only just the music, but whatever it is that is, and you're striving to do that at the highest level possible.
I'm into knives. That's kind of a weird thing, like pocket knives and things like that. And it's really, really fascinating to watch people forge a knife.
Yeah.
And what goes into it, not only just the design of the knife, but the what's in the steel when they're literally blacksmithing the steel and how they fold the metal and all that kind of stuff. And there is an art to that. And we don't see that, you know, we see the finished product a lot of the times, but we all know, for those of us that have really good kitchen knives as opposed to not good kitchen knives, it really makes a difference when you're using them and how long they keep their edge and all those kinds of things. And I think that is sort of like this. There's a lot that folks don't see. We know each other really well, and we play together a lot. And so we play off each other. When I hear Nathan doing something, I kind of will go into that, and you know, it becomes a natural, you know, to your question, it becomes just a sort of a natural thing. We hear these phrases and how they intersect and how they go all that, but it comes from experience, and it comes from education and training.
And so a lot of your practice doesn't even involve your instruments. It involves the instruments of yourselves being together. You say you know each other. I mean, you probably get together and hang out. And, you know, the more you know each other individually and spiritually, I guess,
Yeah.
feeds into that, you know, that craft.
Absolutely. the dynamic's completely different when Amy's not here.
All right.
I mean,
Yeah,
she's actually, this is a different ensemble
Yeah.
with,
Yeah.
or if we have a sub, we played a thing last week that Amy couldn't do, and so we had a horn player come from Lincoln and play with us. And
Apart
just
from-
the dynamic of the
apart
group's completely different.
Apart from the horn, how does she make you different? Just, I know we don't have much time.
She
but-
adds class.
knows.
Yeah.
She has
She's
class.
most of the drum patch for sure.
But she, just another voice that is able to do what Louis was describing. And when we have a sub, the gentleman that played with us last week, a fine horn player, like very good, but didn't have some of the innate things that we automatically do as a group because we've been playing together for,
Yeah.
so
And,
long.
think of a conversation you have with somebody who's not very good at conversation. And then think of a conversation that you have with your best friend or three of your best friends. That conversation is going to be very different depending upon who those people are. Because it's innately part of us. It's who we are. God has made us all unique and individual. And when we come together as a community and participate in making music together, it's a special opportunity for something special to happen.
In the same way that we practice to make this not a tool and an extension of ourselves, we practice to make each other not a tool, but an extension of ourselves.
Yeah. So thank you so much for allowing us
Thank
to
you.
come.
Yeah, I could
Appreciate
go
it.
for another hour.
Yeah.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.